And his talk today is the Tech Toolbox. A techie comes home. Please welcome Carlos Ray Romero.
Thank you for that warm introduction. Again, my name is Carlos Romero. I came to school at New Mexico Tech starting in 1992, and I'm not going to tell you when I graduated. I think a lot of the administrators and the people who helped me here try to help me leave. It's not because I don't think they didn't like me, they just wanted me to go somewhere else. I want to talk today about what did New Mexico Tech provide me in my years here. So I was here for 6 years, a little bit more, like 6.5 almost. And then I led a life after being a quasi-scientist or engineer while I was here and deciding that that wasn't necessarily where my passion lied, and my advisor helped me figure that out. In fact, his quote was, you know, you're a good engineer. You could almost be a great engineer, but I don't think you want to do that. He goes, but you're really good at talking to people. So I think if you found a career where you got to do that a lot more and a little bit less engineering, you would probably be happier. And I can say that through my time here, which makes New Mexico Tech different than any other place, my advisor and I had that relationship from day one. So I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I grew up in a little town in northern New Mexico called Espanola. Went to St. Catherine's Indian School in Santa Fe, graduated from there, and then came to school at New Mexico Tech. And I was very fortunate. I wasn't sure what I wanted to be, and I actually was in that line of being a mathematics major. And then I went to the engineering undecided line when they had you come during orientation, because I got to work with some mathematicians, and I said, I don't know if I could do mathematics all the time. And I met a person by the name of Bob Bretz. He was a professor in petroleum and natural gas engineering, and really began to help shape my passions and what I like doing. And so I can tell you Dr. Bretz and I had a lot of conversations. Some of them were towards the end of semesters when I wasn't doing a great job, and he was scolding me a little bit and telling me what that I needed to do better. And some of those were just talking about what I was passionate about, what I really liked doing, and where I thought what he called the toolbox that tech provides you was going to give me. So I can say every course I took, and I'm going to start handing out some pictures here. So this is what I look like my first semester here at Tech. With some of my colleagues from Santa Fe and Cuesta, and you can tell it's not on campus because, you know, when you grow up in a rural community and you come to another rural community, you like to go explore. So this was taken over there, and we didn't know the name of it, but that's Quebradas, the Badlands. So we spent a lot of time, I'm going to pass these around, driving around all the dirt roads around Socorro. So if we didn't have a lab in the afternoon and we had to study and we really didn't want to, we went driving. And we got to explore Socorro. But we also got to do exploring caves. We got to explore old mine sites. We got to explore a lot of really neat things that you get here in Socorro. I also had the opportunity while I was here to do some research, and so I worked at Los Alamos National Lab and Particle Accelerator, and I worked in the ion beam materials lab, and my job was to calibrate some of the beam lines. And that's when I thought I was going to be a scientist. I said, being a scientist seems like a really cool thing. So then I did, and they put me working 3 stories underground in a lab for the summer. And it was really cool because I knew what everything did. There was a bunch of wires and all kinds of lines everywhere. Little did I realize, the more training I got, the more exposure to radiation I could have. I said, this is counterintuitive to me. You should have the people that don't know what the dangers are get close. And as you know more, you should step further and further away. Couldn't understand that, but got to do all those cool things at Los Alamos and realized, you know, maybe it's not a scientist I wanted to be, and I met some engineers there and started looking more at engineering because you got to build things. And the one thing I really liked about engineering was you couldn't solve problems by yourself. And I'm the youngest of 5. I have 4 older brothers. And I can tell you I couldn't do anything by myself. I was the youngest, so of course I had 4 brothers always telling me what to do. And so being an engineer really seemed to be the way I was going. While I was here, I got to do a few things, and I started, you know, I was pretty good with people. I joined student government while I was here. I was the student body vice president while I was here. I hosted a group, and Dave Lapree's in the back there, and this is Dave Lapree Sr. here, who came to my first conference I hosted here at New Mexico Tech. And you'll see this group of college students from all over New Mexico. And the topic we had at this conference, besides a bunch of other things, was we had just passed the lottery scholarship legislation with Senator Michael Sanchez. And from our actuarial analysis of the fund, only 40% of the lottery scholarship was going into, or the scholarship proceeds were going into the lottery scholarship fund. We realized it wasn't going to be sustainable. So this was the first meeting where people from student government across New Mexico came together and talked about what should the lottery scholarship be? Should it be means tested? Should it be GPA driven? Should it be full scholarship, partial? Should we weight it for different colleges? And we spent a whole weekend here at New Mexico Tech talking about that. And our solution was we need more money. So our goal was to get 100% of the lottery proceeds to go into the scholarship fund. But I can say of all the other universities out there, only the New Mexico Tech students did the actuarial analysis. Everybody else talked about the social justice issues and everything else. New Mexico Tech students, you'll see them in some of those pictures, have their computers out. They're running the spreadsheets with the numbers and saying, you know, in year 7, this thing is starting to go belly up. We need to do something. So that became our focus. Got to host a woman who was a congressperson at the time. And you can see my hair gets longer and longer as I go to school here at Tech. Congresswoman Heather Wilson came down. We got to tour her around our campus. And at that time, we were looking for support of one of what my boss's goals was the Magdalena Ridge Observatory. So we're trying to get her support to bring some mirrors over so we could build the Magdalena Ridge Observatory. And it was great because we had students saying how important research was. And, you know, I was very fortunate when I left here to go off and get an MBA and start teaching. Taught at Highlands University, at the United World College, taught at Luna Community College. And I can say the students at New Mexico Tech have a unique perspective about the importance of research and the application of research in their education. And that's something that sets New Mexico Tech students apart from others. Had a really, one of the things I did to pay for college is I worked in the dorms. I was a resident assistant. And that was a great experience. I got to interact with students, facilities people, folks from all over campus. But the one thing it really helped me do was one time I became the coordinator of the conferences, for summer conferences. So I had all these resident assistants that were my friends and colleagues. We worked together, you kind of lived together, you know, in the dorms. And then Friday happens, and then Monday comes about, and I'm their boss. And I really struggled. All of a sudden, I'm their supervisor, everybody who's my peer, right? And I was in student government, and I was the vice president, the student body president. Now I was my employee. So on Mondays when we have student government meetings, I was underneath him, and then the rest of the time he was subordinate to me. It became this really tenuous time, right? Struggling through that, and that was a really good training ground for me as I moved throughout my career. When you are promoted in positions and all of a sudden you have responsibility. And we were able to host a really interesting group of elder hostel people. If you're familiar with what elder hostel is, people come on campuses. And you'll see this sporting young man here in the blue and the white. He graduated from New Mexico Tech in the 1940s and came here. He was in his 80s. He served in World War II. As part of the Army Air Corps that later became the Air Force. He was a pilot, and he retired from the military, talked about his time at Tech, remembers when the first woman came to Tech when he was in school here. I think he actually came here in the late 30s through the 40s. And all of the students there just loved him. He had tons of stories about the old Driscoll Hall and the Orr House and all the neat things at Tech. But he kind of showed us he owned companies, sold a Fortune 500 company, really began to show the interesting things. He was a miner. He said he loved mining until he had to go work in a mine. And went to Arizona, worked in a mine, and realized he didn't want to be a miner anymore and became a pilot. And that's kind of how, and he said that was such an interesting thing, but everything he learned as a miner really helped him in the rest of his life and those relationships he developed. I was very fortunate also while I was at New Mexico Tech to start a group called the Society of Mexican American Engineers and Scientists. I was president of the Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers, and part of our trip, we got to go out and see a space shuttle launch. And this is when Japan was sending up a comrade with our astronauts, so we got out there, and fortunate enough that some folks that were here at White Sands were there with us, and they mentored us through that process. We stayed out there in Florida for a week. Really lucky to do those things. You can see my hair is about this big in that particular picture because I was in Florida and I have really curly hair. I used to have really curly long hair, and you know, curly hair and humidity don't mix well together. But all the way through my career, so I left tech and I went to get my graduate degrees, and after all that I went to go do some work in finance. And while I was at Tech, I took every economics course that New Mexico Tech had to offer, because when I got into my engineering design courses, I really enjoyed the economics of plant design. And what does it actually take to get a project completed? And I realized it's more than just the engineering, because I had some really good engineers that I went to school with. I realized there's two things. There's finances and politics. You can't get a chemical plant built unless you can get regulatory bodies to approve it. You can't get regulatory bodies to approve it unless political people are in favor of your project. So those are the things I really enjoyed and I started working on. So I went to go work in Santa Fe doing public finance, worked with Governor Gary Johnson, and since I had an engineering background and science background, they asked me to work on the drought in New Mexico, so we came up with some novel solutions to drought problems. They're really not novel. If you go to new school at New Mexico Tech, you start connecting things together. So instead of having just standalone water systems, we created pipelines to connect one city to the next. So if you have excess in one and not enough in the other, you kind of do this thing they call, you know, sharing or mass balancing or all these other things that, you know, they teach you as an engineer to do. Took that to state government a little bit, worked with Governor Bill Richardson a little bit on developing some novel approaches to financing highways and water projects and wastewater projects. So I put a lot of engineers to work by doing finance work. I was very fortunate. It's really interesting in this picture here, all the vice presidents here that were my mentors while I was at Tech. So I received one of the first Student Services Awards while I was at Tech, and here's a picture of my mom with Herb Fernandez and Dan Lopez and Van Romero. Van Romero is the guy with the curly hair and the big mustache, and you'll hear him a little bit later today. But on here also, 3 people who are directors at EMRTC are in this picture. So these folks here, the administration at New Mexico Tech really helped formulate my, a lot of my career and how I approach politics, how I approach professionalism. You know, I was able to take some risks here at New Mexico Tech, and Yvonne Manzano's in the back there, and she knows some of the risks I took. So when I was a student here, I did some, I said, we need a little bit more culture at New Mexico Tech. You know, New Mexico Tech doesn't look anything like Española, so I need some, at the winter time, we need some farolitos out here during the winter, you know, Christmas season, and we need to get some pozole out here, and we need to have some mariachi singing some Christmas carols, so we did that. But one year they didn't put enough sand out there, so I used some of my ingenuity I didn't learn here. I may have learned it at home, and I could have hot-wired a front-end loader and taken and picked up some more sand that we needed, but everything went back exactly where it was supposed to go. But only at New Mexico Tech did they let students have that kind of risk. Now they lock everything up and it's behind a fence. So I was very fortunate to be allowed to take some calculated risks, to explore some of my traits, and all along the way I think New Mexico Tech was giving me this toolbox. As an engineer, you develop these tools to solve problems, right? Well, they also help you to solve problems in life, and being a New Mexico Tech student, being able to put into practice what I was learning in theory, whether it was unit operations lab in a real lab situation out near EMRTC, whether it was in politics, whether it was doing a surety course and designing a skiff facility that was later to be built. You know, all those kinds of things really helped me out in my life as I went through. And I think that personal relationship, I remember being in a class where there were just 2 of us. You know what happens when you don't show up to class and there's only 2 students? The other student calls you and said, never miss class again. And so you get that good peer pressure. And if I would have been amongst a group, you know, when I graduated from St. Catherine's Indian School, there were 35 in my graduating class. There were 7 in my graduating program when I graduated from New Mexico Tech. You know, I worked at UNM as an associate vice president, and I used to participate in graduation, and we would graduate 3,000 people twice a year, around 3,000 people. And we would move them through the stage, right, quickly. Write your name on a piece of paper, you're in the pit. Here at New Mexico Tech, when you graduate, it's fun. You're with your friends, and you walk across that stage slowly by yourself. And you have all these people congratulating you, and it's not hurried. And so that's some of the things that made New Mexico Tech unique and really set me up to be successful in my career. And I was happy to be able to come back to New Mexico Tech in July as Associate VP for Research, and a couple of weeks ago I was asked to be the acting director at EMRTC. And people like Dennis Hunter were there when I was a student. There were other people teaching psychopharmacology when I was here. When I was a student, in fact, Dr. Etzkorn, he may not remember, when he was speaking at an ACES conference in Albuquerque, when I was in high school, talked about some of the great work he was doing, and actually is one of the reasons why I decided to come to school here, by listening to a faculty member talk passionately about their research. And so one of the reasons why I came back to Tech is hopefully I can help students get passionate about research and really have that great experience, the same experience I had while I was here. Just hopefully a little bit safer. Thanks for listening. Are we gonna take questions? Is that part of the thing, or no? Sure. Okay, thank you. Somebody at the mountain the other day was cleaning, getting ready for the Paint the M, and they said, when were you here? And I said, well, for a long time, 92 to 98. They found this spring fling Frisbee up near the mountain that somebody had left. So if anybody was here in 96, this beach donkey bingo was here. So it's still there. Plastic doesn't die, even here in the Southwest. Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
What are some of your current pet projects, your favorite ones that you're doing that you feel like benefit tech students?
Oh, some of my pet projects that benefit tech students. Well, I haven't been here that long, so I don't have too many pets. But one of the ones I'm doing is working on a program with Santa Fe Indian School to develop a stronger network to get more Native American students to come to Tech, you know. And I think Tech is going to beam some calculus courses to Santa Fe Indian School. So I think increasing the diversity of our students. We went to Mexico last week talking about bringing more Mexican students here. So, you know, sometimes in a world that may not be 100% safe, we can either send our students out, which we should do. I mean, that's how we make the world safe, right? We get to know everybody. But also bringing more students here so you can have that global education and that experience. So those are a couple of the pet projects. I'll be working on some more. At EMRTC, I'm looking for resources of how we can get more students involved in research projects and more active at EMRTC. So I'll be working on that. Any others? Well, thank you so much. This is great.